Welcome back to Where You Live. I'm Mary Ruth Harris. As promised, we are here in sunny Powell River. Joining me is Phil Russell, and he is the brains behind this amazing idea and opportunity. I'm going to ask Phil to tell us all about it. So what is happening here behind us?
Well, let me just say this. I'm not just the only brains behind this. John, Louis, and Cindy Palin from the Tla'amin First Nations are also part of, they're the cultural guides for this project.
Excellent.
And what this is the non-Indigenous community commissioning a traditional dugout canoe with Indigenous carvers carving it. And Joe Martin from Tofino has come over to teach the local carvers how to build the canoe.
Because Joe is a master carver, right?
Joe is a master canoe builder. He's built over 60 canoes.
Oh, okay.
If you Google Joe Martin, you'll see there's lots of video on him.
All right.
And I've heard Joe's name over the years, so that's why it came to the forefront when we were deciding, when I sat with John and Cindy, and who we would have working on the project.
Now, the interesting thing that caught my eye, in addition to them doing it here at Willingdon Beach in Powell River, is that the community at large is invited to come and participate. Can you explain that piece?
That's the whole purpose of why we're here in this place. Normally these canoes are done in the Indigenous community, so very few people outside of the Indigenous communities get to witness this, and they certainly very rarely ever get to put their hands on it. And so we chose, John Louis actually chose the spot, and we did it deliberately because this is Willingdon Beach Trail, and most of the community here are here at some point or another.
Yes.
And so we're here for eight weeks, and we figured that we'll get most of the community exposed to this project.
Okay.
And we'll get them on it. And we didn't do any media until the carving started. We wanted conversation, which is why you have this paddle.
Yes.
And so we want the non-Indigenous community to engage with the Indigenous community face to face, not through Facebook, not through the media, not through the paper, and to hear their stories.
Yes.
Genocide happened here, and Canada has done a very good job until now of ignoring that, and lots of Canadians aren't even aware of it.
Right.
So for me, this was the opportunity for the non-Indigenous community. What's happened here is the Indigenous community, I went to the elders, I went to the Hagus and the executive, I went to John and Cindy at the Tla'amin Health, and the Indigenous community said, we're opening the door to the non-Indigenous community, come in, learn our culture, get on that canoe, and come in.
And have you had many people coming by to learn how to...
We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. We have the schools. I won't be surprised if a school shows up here while we're talking. We've had we've had all the schools, 2 a day in the morning and in the afternoon. Like normally this canoe would have been done in 3 weeks with this many people working on it.
Right.
But we made sure we extended it so that we can give the opportunity for the community to engage.
Yes.
And that's why it's 8 weeks, not the 3 weeks. And it's working.
Yes.
People are coming down and they're engaging. And for the most part, 99% of it, it's all been positive.
Okay.
And there's the odd one.
Yeah.
But that's to be expected.
Right.
And I don't engage with that because this is a 7th-generation project.
Right. Yes.
We're starting with the great-grandchildren. I have great-grandchildren here.
Yeah.
I want them to connect with this land through the Indigenous teachings.
Right.
The Indigenous community has said, we'll do that.
Right.
We will teach you how to live on this land.
Right.
Through our protocols, our ceremonies, and I have been very privileged.
And speaking of the traditional ceremonies, how is the canoe going to be presented to the Tla'amin Nation?
On November the 25th, we're hoping to launch from Willingdon Beach here, paddle into Tla'amin, and the community will be on the beach there, and we will ask to come ashore, and that's my dog.
I see a lot of tails wagging.
Oh, it's not just my dog. The other one's going to. So we're going to go paddle to the beach, and the elders and the community will be there, and we will present to the community on the beach. Contingent on the weather, of course, being November. If not, we will take it into the Salish Centre. The non-Indigenous community are going to put on a feast.
Excellent.
We under the teachings and the protocols of the Tla'amin people, we will present these canoes
Okay.
in the way that it's supposed to be done.
Wonderful.
And the thing is, it's all learning. So
Yes.
I'm not going in with the expectations that we're going to get it right 100%.
Right.
Because to learn, you have
Yeah.
to make mistakes. And I have certainly made enough mistakes.
So the great thing is that you can come down with your families and the kids and the grandparents, and you can come down and you can be a part of the carving of this canoe and learn from a master carver and some junior carvers. Is that what they're
Apprentice
called?
carvers.
Apprentice carvers that are learning from him. It's an amazing opportunity to see this happening up close and personal. So Russell, Phil, thank you so much for telling us about this project and explaining it to us. What a wonderful opportunity for the non-Indigenous population in Powell River.
I think
Yeah.
so.
All right,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. All right, we're going to be right back and we're going to chat with the Master Carver. Stay right where you are. Welcome back to Where You Live. I'm Mary Ruth Harris. We are here in Powell River, and joining us now is Master Carver Joe Martin from Long Beach area. Now, Joe, how long have you been here training the apprentice carvers?
I think this is our 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3.5 weeks or so. Yeah, I first came here probably about 2 months ago or so.
Okay.
Yes.
And when you're working with young apprentice carvers, what is kind of the first couple of lessons that you're wanting them to absorb about working with a natural wood?
Awareness. Awareness is one of the key things. A lot of people are not, so used to working with wood, and sometimes people don't understand about the different grains and how you have to work with it, and even working around knots and stuff like that. So, and how to level things. Yeah, I was many years ago, and I always give credit to a chief that was from the Heshquet First Nations, and he was a master carver himself, and he told me that you can use anything to level anything. You can use a rock, a string, a shoelace, anything, as long as it hangs straight down.
Right.
If there's no wind, it'll hang straight down.
Right.
But he said he would always use a rock to level his canoes. And so that made my life much easier. I don't have to always use a level, because it doesn't always give you a level, depending on the angle of wood. But yeah, anyway, so a rock and a string and so on. And so those are just some of the teachings that they did pass on to me.
Right. Now, what is the experience like for you to watch these young apprentices?
Some of them are older than me, actually. Like everywhere else, along all across Canada, a lot of people were not as I don't know how to put it. They were not exposed to the things I was with my father and my grandfather.
Right.
For example, when I was very young, I didn't have a choice to go or not. Hunting, fishing, trapping, or canoe building. Get ready, we're going. It wasn't, do you want to come?
Right.
It wasn't like that at all. And I think that in all the communities all across this country, I think it was like that for all the young boys and girls to learn about how we need to live on this land, and also to take care of it.
Right.
And so, when people were learning from a very young age, all of those things were instilled in them. So
Right.
I like to talk about art. Totem poles in our culture it is like our Constitution.
Yes.
Certainly when the first Europeans arrived here, I always talk about that. We were illiterate, couldn't read those things. But so were they when they arrived here and seen our totem poles. They have
Correct.
no understanding of them, because, they'd be taught to us ever since we're little, like these little children running around here. And so, no, those things are things that they just did not understand. And I think that Indigenous peoples around the world, wherever they are, and peoples all around the world, I think art has been one of the most important aspects of humanity the world over.
Right.
And basically, how I see it is as an aid to our memories. And so therefore, that's how a lot of these teachings were passed on through song and dance, and discussions about that song and that dance and what it means. And people even have, you know, the teachings or the songs about going across to the island over there in a canoe like this. But you cannot just take off and go over there. People had to be aware of what the weather is like.
Yes.
And so people didn't expect you to arrive here on this day because, oh, well, we can't expect them to be arriving here. The weather's like this.
Now, when you're carving a canoe, and this one is very interesting because not only do you have 3 apprentices working with you, you also have members of the non-Indigenous community coming forward and learning how to shave the wood a little bit and carve and understand the process. At what point will you decide what artwork will adorn the canoe? Like, how is that going to be?
That will be decided upon by the fellows that are from this community to do that finishing touch.
Okay.
For me, the carving of a hull is one of my things that I like to do. And basically, when I start these things, I like to start them in the forest. Cut a tree down and then carve the canoe there and haul it out.
Right.
You know, our people had been subjected to the Indian Act and the churches and the residential schools. And even the word reservation, you come from a reservation, that's not even our word. That's created from the Indian Act. And so there's a bit of stigma attached to that. And so, you know, our villages here existed a lot longer than the Indian Act. You know, some of the villages here may be 10,000 years old. And the village that I come from over there on Mears Island is one of the oldest villages on Vancouver Island. And people have been living in that site for about 10,000 years. And so, you know that I'm from here.
Right.
But that is stuff that was not taught in schools here in former times. And a lot of this only started coming out after the residential school syndrome, if you want to call it that, began to be more exposed or spoken about and so on. And so, you know, it was a teaching not taught there at all very well. I remember when I was in school, the only Native studies we had was when there was a treaty signed in Ontario and when Louis Riel died.
Yes. Search and rescue.
Yeah.
Out and about. Now, when you're working with the apprentices,
Yeah.
and apprentices naturally would learn from the master, does the master learn anything from the apprentices?
Oh, certainly. You know, and I always look forward to working with new people because every time I work with new people, I learn something.
Okay.
You know, and even if I only learn one thing, and it's great.
Yeah.
You know, I might not know everything. I don't know everything.
Now,
So,
how many canoes have you carved in your lifetime?
I don't know, 50 or 60. I lost count.
You've lost track.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Well,
But yeah, they're things. Canoes. These canoes, they evolved on the coast here for thousands of years. You know, and so I learned how to do it because of my father and my grandfather.
right. Now, what kind of wood is this?
Western red cedar.
Western red cedar. Okay, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Just beautiful.
Now,
All right.
the log that was selected for this was certainly selected from a forest company, the dryland sort here.
Yeah.
But in the former days, our people would never do that because we went out there and chose the finest red cedar, and so we didn't have to add on these pieces. As you can see, there's an add-on here, and there's one on this side here. This one here was rather large, had to go from there, like 14 feet of it. And so, you know, they didn't have to do this.
Right.
And so, you know, in reality, this canoe should have already been finished. But because we have to glue all this back together, it takes us a little bit more time.
Yeah.
But it's okay, then, you know, we learn. And a lot of people come and ask about this stuff. And I talk about the disappearing rainforest and the western red cedar, which is a very important part of indigenous cultures all along this coast.
Right.
All along. And it is very important for us. You know, and so, you know, the intact rainforests, we need to have them.
Yes.
You know, we all have to live together,
Right.
and we need to have them.
Right. Okay, well, Joe, thank you so very much for joining us today and sharing with us your wisdom and your experience.
An honor, thank you.
450 years, that's how old this tree was before it was felled. And that's what these canoes are being carved out of. That's the year 1557. Think about what was happening in history then, and this little tree at that time was just a little seedling. Amazing. And now it's going to be shared with the non-Indigenous community, and they are participating in the carving, and they're going to gift it to the Tla'amin Nation. Fantastic. I'm Mary Ruth Harris. You're watching Where You Live. Coming up next, North Island College.